Hi, everybody.
You can't stop the rhythm of the drum, the pounding of the drum. When the banter them are serving the food who gone wrong. Go tell your friend lava made to fall not too long ago. We were rocking show, keeping the steady flow, sending a vibe for glow. Yo, feel the baseline in the air, in the atmosphere like the burning sphere. Gonna make sure our message rings loud and clear.
Makes you feel so excited. You better pass it on before you're too stoned. Natural.
My name is Célia Fossard from Les Nubians. I'm from Paris and Cameroon.
I'm Helen from Les Nubians and I'm from Africa and France.
But I'm citizen of the world.
Big Afropean. That's what I am.
Clam is one of the coolest things happening now. Clam knows everything about fashion, everything about elevation of spirit.
The international Afro culture.
Underground, up to be hip culture.
Modern, contemporary, urban.
Interesting, sometimes silly.
It's showing, African culture all around the planet. And more than that, all the other cultures united under the Clam bannier. Creativity is when you feel empowered and you know your power and you know how to transform what God's give you, inspiration, and how you turn it into something that can exist.
Creativity is light and fire.
We are creators, and this is the most beautiful power that we have as human, Africa is the motherland. Africa is everything. Africa is the beginning. Africa is the roots. Africa is my heart,
When I think of Africa, I think about music, I think about dancing, I think about what we call la vivance.
Africa is the future. Definitely. Africa is the future.
That's a promo for a project we're about to start making next year. We've got 2 Nigerian directors, one based in Paris and one based in New York. And we're post-producing it in South Africa. And we're going to do a little channel within a channel inside MTV. So gradually we're going to start our own channel, but caretaked inside MTV Africa. So we're using a much bigger channel to start our own channel. And effectively we're going to make a television program of 24 minutes of African culture globally, which will be housed in a secured digital vault on the internet where everything would be available, and make about 10 to 15 episodes a week available for mobile partners. And this is going to be done out of South Africa, and we've just done, this is the first sequence of a 20-minute promo that we've been shopping around almost in a type of auction to the various South African broadcasters. But it was really aimed at MTV, and they are very excited and have agreed to do the project on a 50-50 basis with us. They first of all wanted all of the rights, and we said it's totally impossible for you to have any intellectual property, and you can share with us maximum 50-50 on this. So after 8 months of negotiating, we finally got to the point where we're going to be partners, equal partners, and they won't own any of the copyright. How many of you here have ever seen an African film in the last year? It must be in Europe. Well, that's quite a lot, because in South Africa, or Africa, there wouldn't be that many people who've seen African films. And what we're really looking at, because of being driven by necessity to come up with alternative methods of production and distribution, started a company several years ago called DV8, letter D, letter V, number 8, and it was really, we're going to start out making 8 digital video films. But through the process realized that the possible financiers of this, it was really difficult. So we changed the sort of thinking as a play on the word deviate to do something differently. And from every sort of monthly, annually, we've realized that every single stage of this process has been one of experiment, because I think we heard this morning about gatekeepers. And the gatekeeper process in South Africa and Africa is extremely severe, where there was almost a prohibition of the making of films, feature films in particular. South Africa makes about 4 to 5 films a year, and the rest of Africa, probably a lot more than that, but it's very sporadic, even though there's a very sophisticated infrastructure for the making of films, which I'll explain later on. One of the problems we face globally is that the rest of the world, both film festivals, television stations, and distributors, they buy 1 or 2 African films a year. I'm sure all of you or some of you will have seen Bamako by Abderrahmane Sissako last year. There's a new film coming out by Haile Gerima next year. And whenever I'm selling films, because I'm also been forced into being a salesperson, I get told, well, look, we've bought our 1 African film for the year. So what about the 800 Nigerian films that are made a year and the 20 or 30 other African films that are made a year? Because in Africa, there aren't that many cinemas for them to be seen in. So what we're really looking at is in our problem is the solution. It's the solution to how to get our films to people in Africa. And I've left this sheet on the screen for you to look at, and it's sort of figures that although I don't hold a huge amount of store on figures, but it's the internet statistics for Africa at the end of September of this month. And we can see the internet users in the year 2000 and how they've jumped, and the figures are jumping in huge amount of percentages. And I've taken about the 7 or 8 of the largest internet users. We have a 4.7% penetration. We have 43 million, nearly 44 million internet users in Africa out of a total population of 933 million, 3.5% of the internet users in the world. But our growth is absolutely phenomenal at 874.6%. And the major countries, Algeria, Egypt, Kenya, Morocco, Nigeria, South Africa, surprisingly, Sudan and Zimbabwe are included in the list. But what we are seeing is, because the internet is, for me, very closely linked to transport, in that it's a superhighway. And because the distances in Africa are so vast, and traditional forms of distribution, i.e. cinemas, do not exist or haven't existed apart from multiplexes in South Africa, the solution in Africa is the internet and mobile networks. And satellite distribution, I think, is really going to have a very huge impact. We have really, I'm going to speak about 2 things this afternoon. One is sport, and the other is gold, and how the 2 of these relate to the film industry. Sport is extremely interesting, and just having witnessed the World Cup rugby and the effect that that has had in South Africa on the general public has been unbelievable. And the rugby stars are huge stars like they are all over the world, but they're going on a week-long ticker tape parade throughout the whole country. And it's almost like a tipping point. There's a lot of energy being focused on the success story to turn a sporting event into a positive, uplifting tipping point where people can do less crime and spend more money on commercial activities. We have a ticking clock, which is a unique situation. Next year is the Beijing Olympics, where upwards of 4 billion people will be viewing the Olympics. But in 2010 in South Africa, we have to host the World Cup football. There was talk of, again, 4.5 to 5 billion people viewing that football game, and over 30 billion views of the football is to be expected. South Africa is an analog country. We've been given 2.5 years to become a digital country. We cannot ask FIFA to change the timetable of the football 2010 World Cup. Although I think certain people are asking them at the moment, because there's an underground being built in Johannesburg at the moment, and they're hitting so many mine shafts from the gold mines. They're having to take a long time to go around all the different mine shafts. So what I'm really interested in and heard about all this morning is actually data mining, because everything that's been spoken about today is about how to get your telephone number or your internet address, and how other people are going to mine your information to make them rich. And hopefully you can get rich out of that process too. So ultimately I've become cynical on the one hand because I thought I was a filmmaker, but I'm actually a miner, a data miner. So I'm spending a lot of my time trying to work out, and I think this afternoon's two presentations we've heard are extremely good examples of how to mine data in many and different ways. So I started off wanting to be a lawyer, became a filmmaker, and now I am a miner of gold. The headquarters of FIFA is just outside Soweto, and it's a big, huge glass building. And on the left-hand side, they're building the soccer stadium, and on the right-hand side is a mine dump of 50 to 60 years old. And the gold dust being blown off that mine dump is covering both the football stadium, the workers, and all of the extremely interesting people coming in and out of FIFA headquarters, including myself, in a fine coat of gold dust. And it's an incredibly interesting concept, because I went there to speak to them about a television program, internet-based, mobile-based project about football, because they have got more money than anybody in the continent, more money than anybody in the government, and they are the new tsars of television and the internet. And they are very, very media savvy and very, very interested in how 2010 can become a tipping point for the whole of Africa, not just South Africa. Because what I'm really worried about is Africa becoming, there's a new form of apartheid. It's a digital apartheid. And it is, unless Africa becomes part of the superhighway and becomes digitized, it will become more of a problem for the rest of the world, because we're only as strong as our weakest links. And I think without Africa being fully part of the digital economy, we're going to see a whole pile of other problems arise that could have been resolved. Health, housing, communication issues, I think they're essential to our being able to partake and participate in the world as we see it coming. We have, like most other countries in the world, suffered the colonization. Our young filmmakers all aspire to be Hollywood filmmakers. The sacrifices being made on the altar of Hollywood by young filmmakers who are not wanting to look at other African filmmakers, who are not looking at Brazilian cinema or Chinese cinema, but all, like the director of Tsotsi, want to go from a small African film to a $40 million feature film in Hollywood. So we have quite an interesting cross-pollinization of ideas going on. Where we fit in as Deviate is to try and develop and nurture young storytellers, because every single film I've made has been with a first-time director. I'm a film school, I'm a travel agent, psychiatrist, parent, and all the films are with first-time filmmakers. And the gatekeeper culture we have to deal with, strangely enough, from government is not the problem. Government in South Africa has been unbelievably positive. It started 20 years ago with the anti-apartheid movement, filmmakers who worked exceptionally hard to put film and television on the political agenda, to the extent where we have a one-state subsidy scheme for 300 million rand a year, just less than 30 million pounds a year, from the Department of Trade and Industry, which is a tax-free grant. We have a government bank, the Industrial Development Corporation, with another 30 million pounds to put into film. And unfortunately, it's all been going to incoming films, or a large percentage of it has been going to Blood Diamonds and much larger films than South African films. I want to really speak about the relationship between audience, content, and distribution. For the first time ever, we're able to consider an audience that is global. Because in South Africa, I've made 7 feature films. each one of them, the theatrical numbers has been between 30 and 40,000 South Africans going to the cinema paying to see the film. The DVDs on first release have been about 3,000 to 4,000 per film. But we've discovered a new market very much based on the Nigerian model, where second-run DVDs in township and rural areas are getting over 100,000 DVD sales. The price has been cut by a third, and the number of DVDs being moved now in informal manners and informal ways is trebling. The new broadcaster environment in South Africa changed a month ago. We had one pay TV channel, Mnet, with about 70 channels, mainly sport and television, sport and films and movies. One national broadcaster, the SABC, with 3 channels, and a second free-to-air channel called ETV, which largely is sort of American movies and films and content that the first 2 broadcasters haven't bought. So the 4 new pay TV broadcasters, the first one is very appropriately named Walk on Water. It's a Christian channel, and we have a very large gospel music community in South Africa. It's the biggest buyer of music in the country, and a film was released recently called Faith Like Potatoes, which was marketed exclusively after a very short theatrical run on direct mail order and broke every record by being bought by various church groups who were telling their people to go and buy this film. The 2 of these new broadcasters, one of them is called Telkom. It's the National Telephone Fixed Line Company, who have a budget of $1 billion to spend in the next 5 years on content. And in Africa and South Africa, that is an amazing opportunity. What the other broadcasters have done is go and buy every piece of content that they can physically get their hands on to block the new broadcasters, which is great for producers and filmmakers, because now the filmmakers have to go and make a lot of content really, really quickly. And they have an incredible vision, Telkom, because not only are they putting up 3 subscription bouquets, expensive, not so expensive, and really cheap, but they're wrapping the entire offering in an IPTV solution, where there will be a digital vault where you can go back and see all of the content that you missed at your own leisure. It'll be subscription-based as well, and it's completely revolutionary from where we come from. One of the biggest challenges facing us at the moment is intellectual property, and I heard a few days ago that our producer organizations, of which we have 2, have taken the broadcaster to Parliament because of their refusal to share intellectual property. Because when you get commissioned by any of our broadcasters, they keep all the copyright. The filmmakers get no rights whatsoever. So we've gone to the headmaster and we've told on them. And Parliament has listened to us fantastically, and they are not happy. So that's going to be changing. The cost of production of content in Africa is extremely cheap and is continuing to drop. In Nigeria, feature films are being made between $10,000 and $20,000 a feature film. 1 week pre-production, 1 week shoot, 1 week edit. After your 4th week, they're in profit. They get between 200,000 and 300,000 buyers of the DVD. And I just heard of a story where a young guy in his early 20s made a feature for $30,000 and sold them at $1 each, and he's done $1.5 million worth of business so far. South Africa is following closely behind Nigeria in that. South Africa's become very expensive because of the incoming service productions and because of the commercial activity, the advertising films being shot there now. If you want to shoot on Clifton First Beach in Cape Town, you have to pay 50 Rand per chair per hour. So people have really cottoned on to the film industry being a fantastic opportunity to make money in other ways. The main important thing for me around the World Cup football is in 2.5 years' time, we have to broadcast on every known format, every platform currently known and in existence by June 2010 to the entire world. Because the 3 or 4 million people who will come as tourists are going to want to upload, go on the internet, take photographs of themselves at the game park or at the football games, and broadcast it back home to wherever they are. And it's the most incredible opportunity that we have to digitize Africa completely in 2.5 years. And that is the legacy that a lot of people are starting to think about how to work and how to leave behind. And right next door to the football stadium outside Soweto is the International Broadcast Center, where there's a 5-acre satellite farm that's going to be built. And for me, if I had my ideal way, I'd like to charge $1 per view per person for a period of 3 to 4 weeks, and then start talking about making content and distributing content in Africa. I know Liz is, we're running out of time, Liz, but I've been through a lot of that. I think what the dialogue that we're having with government right now is the right, as filmmakers, we heard a bit about this morning again, the constitutional right to both be a maker of content but also a receiver of content. And I think YouTube, MySpace, has certainly created a democracy or a democratic potential that we have never seen before. I think the attitude amongst broadcasters is the fuck you sort of attitude, sorry to use this word, but it is what we are told all the time. It's an us and them situation. They're the ones that have the power. We don't have any power. So everything that we're trying to do is to create mutual partnerships with broadcasters. And if it doesn't work, we'll license the films to them for the same amount of money for a few screenings over a very short period of time. The big commercial pay TV channel Mnet got a war chest of $5 million together a few years ago and started buying every single African film that had picture and sound on it, and has been collecting and collating this content into which will eventually become a internet-based form of distribution. The only problem with their very well-intentioned plan is that they are buying the copyright in perpetuity. So a filmmaker who's made 5 to 6 feature films over their life gets $20,000 to $30,000 for their life's work. And that is one legacy we're also working to change. We've designed a interesting multiplex, a virtual multiplex called Cinnabar.net, which in its very stripped down idea is effectively just a digital vault with a storefront, and with the ability to help filmmakers choose how they want to house their content and how they want to distribute it. And it was very interesting to hear the Without a Box discussion this morning, and I think there's a lot to be done in that regard, because it's do-it-yourself distribution, because everybody's doing do-it-yourself production. So what we're really doing is to look to, I think, the models of Without a Box, to build upon that and to allow the filmmakers to choose how they want to distribute their work, because I think the two examples of Aaron and Susan and Lance, you can hear how much of a commitment they've had to make to market and to distribute their films, and not all filmmakers are like that. I don't know if you can read this, but it's just really the last point. It's a football project we have that dovetails with 2010, and it's what we are calling a content spiral, that no longer do you just make a feature film or a documentary, but there are multiple spin-offs, and we again have heard a lot about it, whether they are the trailers and virals, feature film or documentaries, for mobile. So no longer does a filmmaker have to think just about making one piece of content, but you have to think through the validity of your poster and your T-shirt. I caught our distributor. We supplied one of our distributors with posters at a lot of expense to ourselves, and they were selling them to their own theatrical cinemas at a $2 a poster, and we weren't getting any of that revenue. So everything we believe that's connected to a film has revenue potential. And I think, just to end off, Liz, we're really looking very much at the relationship and what is going on in Brazil, in Russia, India, and China, because I think the emerging economies there and what is going on digitally in a production manner and in a distribution world is also of extreme value to us, where we have exactly the same problems of attempting and wanting to communicate to our own audiences, but at the moment being kept from that. Thank you.
Thanks.